How a side pick, huh? I will do my best to mute myself and listen because this door has been nonstop. You gotta unmute, Holly. Unmute, please.
I guess that's your life. You just have to accept it. Sorry.
Thanks again, Harlan.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Kyla, as soon as you're on, let me know, please. Kyla, if you're on, let me know, please.
She just logged in, Harlan. She's in. She's just
There she
muted.
is. I see you. Kyla, you're on mute and no video.
She just sent a message in the chat saying that she's having a hard time unmuting and putting her video on to give her a second.
Okay.
Can unmute her here or you can. But she'll rejoin.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Thank you for joining us. All right, everybody, 2:31, we're going to want to start on time as usual. Just a few preliminary comments here. I did ask the ownership to send any questions that they may have. I did not edit those questions. We did have two attorneys in our community who had some legal type of dissertations. I don't mean it to be impolite, but however, whatever your word you use in your vocabulary, along with questions, and I forward those as they were to Kyla. Kyla and I spoke yesterday. The parameters for this discussion today is that she is going to answer the questions. And then if there is time, she will take questions from the audience for clarity. Yesterday or 2 days ago, you guys, the owners got a summary of that Adam largely put together. I reviewed it as well, of kind of the status of the pool house to date. I think that kind of brings us up to date at the end of the meeting. I'm not anticipating any action will be taken. This is informational only. So Kyla, I think it's your turn. I'll leave it up to you.
Okay.
I'm gonna take my voice off and my video off.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me today. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to, again, speak to you all regarding the material alteration threshold in your association, rebuilding after a casualty, and the different implications that are now in play because there have been changes to the regulations, to the building codes, and to the ordinances over the last few years. So before, and thank you for the questions that I received as well. I'm happy to answer them. Before I go through the different components that were requested, I want to first go back to how we got here. What is a material alteration? What do the BBC documents provide? And what are the different implications or the different changes that we now must look at based on the new laws. If you see me looking off screen, it's because I have some notes. I want to make sure to touch on all of the notes, and that's why I am looking off screen. So first of all, I want to talk about a material alteration. There is a case in Florida called Sterling Village versus Breitenbach. And that case essentially defined material alteration. And so material alteration has been defined as something that palpably or perceptibly varies or changes the form, shape, elements, or specifications of a building from its original design or plan or existing condition in such a manner as to appreciably affect or influence its function, use, or appearance. So as you can tell, it's very specific. It's anything that could make something look different. I'm not sure what happened to the screen. Okay, here we go. Anything that could make something look different, that could be used to be different. So there's some screen sharing going on. I don't think that's me though. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. The Bonita Beach Club Declaration requires for our material alterations approval of at least 75% of the voting interests present in person or by proxy and voting at a members meeting, provided that there is at least 131 approval or yes votes. Okay, so first we talked about what is a material alteration, something that looks different. And then the next step is, well, what is BBC's threshold for approving material alterations? And BBC's threshold is 75% of those voting, assuming that we first provided that we get at least 131 yes votes. All right, so that threshold is non-negotiable. If we get less than 131, then the proposed material alteration fails. If we get more than 131, but less than 75% of those voting approves it, that proposed material alteration also fails. So that threshold is set. So let's talk about any exceptions, because unfortunately or fortunately, whatever it is, every rule has some exceptions. There have been many arbitration cases regarding necessary maintenance. If there's something that has to be maintained by the association and it is considered a material alteration, but it is required, like if a contractor provides an opinion, or an engineer or an architect provides an opinion that says this is going to be necessary, regardless of whether or not it's a material alteration, then even if it's a material alteration, we're not going to discount the fact that it's a material alteration, but a membership vote is now not required because it's necessary maintenance. Another big and more pertinent to your association today, another big exception is if there are changes in the building code, if there are changes in the ordinances or other regulations, that is also considered an exception. So again, the exceptions will allow for the material alterations without the membership vote because it will be necessary or required for the maintenance or the preservation or the protection of the association's common elements. Okay, so let's talk about Bonita Beach Club, and let's talk about your pool house. Before your hurricane, your pool house was a one-story pool house. It was a pool house with bathrooms, you've got plumbing for a sink, you had an ice maker, you got several things, components in your pool house, and electric. So you had a one-story pool house. Now, after your hurricane, your pool house was destroyed. So what are you now required to do? After the hurricane, the association will be required to rebuild what was there previously, so that would have been a one-story pool house with all of the amenities that were previously in there. But now we also have to take into account changes in the codes, changes in the regulations, and the ordinances that are now in effect today, because the law will not allow us to rebuild a one-story pool house with the same amenities, having it be a one-story. And there are several arbitration cases that do support this. You have to follow the code today. They're not going to just simply allow us to rebuild the one-story pool house with all of the amenities that we used to have. So This is where the concept of the two-story default pool house comes from. Because after the discussion with the architects, I believe an engineer is also involved, but definitely the architects, the board was informed that you can't rebuild, number one, in the location where it was, and also I think the Bonita Springs officials were involved. But you can't rebuild in the location where it was previously, number one, and you can't rebuild with all of the different amenities and offerings that the pool house used to have on the first story. So then the discussion was, well, if we're going to have the same things that we used to have, what is it going to look like? And now the requirement, number one, is that it's in a different location. It's not at the same place where it was before. And number two, it has to be there. The components that used to be there, specifically the bathrooms, have to be on the second story. And that's where your two-story default comes from. So if you have a two-story pool house, and we know that well, if we're going to have bathrooms and other amenities, and we know that is required to be put back, that was the default, that means that we're going to show up with a two-story pool house. This means that if we want to do something different, meaning that we want a one-story pool house without all of the amenities, because now we're not allowed to put bathrooms on the first story, that would then become subject to a material alteration vote. So, and I understand that this is not an easy concept to really wrap our minds around, especially, you know, just, I deal with this stuff every day. And I see this stuff every day, and I provide opinions on these situations on a daily basis. And I've worked with colleagues and discussed this matter with colleagues at two firms, actually, my current firm now and my previous firm where I was at just a few months ago. So the folks at those firms are also familiar with the situation, because I wanted to ensure that I was on solid footing when I was providing you all with my legal advice. And all of our research and our discussions have come to the point where if you are going to rebuild your pool house and you're going to provide the amenities that you had previous to this hurricane, your default, the concept of the default, which is not an option, by the way. And I think there are some people who said that it might be an option. The default is not an option. The default is the default. And the default is a two-story pool house, because that's what would happen if you were going to rebuild with all of the amenities. And so now if we want to construct something different, the different would then be the material alteration. So now I'm gonna, and I think is enough for background. Now I'm gonna address some of the more specific questions that were asked in the questions that were given to me previous to this town hall vote, or this town hall meeting. There was a question regarding a revote. Can we have a revote? And the answer is yes. The board can request a revote, and that is possible. The association can request a revote, and that is possible. But from my understanding, and I've checked this, there's no new laws that would change anything from your previous revote, no new opinions regarding new construction laws or new ordinances that have passed, or new changes in the code that would necessitate a revote. But you can do a revote, and if a revote is scheduled, the material alteration threshold remains the same. So again, to remind everyone, material alteration threshold is the approval of at least 75% of those voting, provided at least 131 units vote yes. Okay, so if you do a revote, the material alteration threshold remains the same. There was also a question regarding ADA bathrooms. My understanding is now there's an option to convert your bathrooms in the A and E buildings from regular bathrooms to ADA bathrooms. And please, anyone, and board members, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I want to make sure that I'm talking about the proper information. The fact that if you could convert those bathrooms to ADA, my understanding is it would fulfill the ADA bathroom requirement in relation to the pool area and pool use. And so now there's a question of whether or not we even need to put the bathrooms back into the pool house to fulfill that ADA use, ADA bathroom requirement close to the pool. So this is a viable option, but it is an option, right? It's the conversion of the ADA bathrooms in the A and E buildings. It's a viable option, but it is an option and it's not a requirement. So what you had before in your A and E buildings were not ADA bathrooms. There is no requirement in any code that would require you all to change it to ADA, which means that if you do change it, it's subject to a material alteration vote. Again, under the same thresholds that we talked about. And if this vote does pass, that doesn't negate the requirement that we have to rebuild the bathrooms in the pool house. So if we don't want to put the bathrooms in the pool house, that is also still subject to a material alteration vote. So there are two different components, and they could work together in that if you succeed as an association in getting a material alteration vote to change the bathrooms in A and E to ADA bathrooms, and a material alteration vote to not put the bathrooms in the pool house, then you would be able to succeed in possibly getting the one-story pool house, depending on the other components and whether or not it would be required to have that second story. So again, to summarize, in terms of the ADA bathrooms in buildings A and E and the pool house bathrooms, these are two separate components. And so the conversion of the bathrooms in A and E building to ADA compliant bathrooms would require a material alteration vote. And additionally, not reinstalling or rebuilding the bathrooms in the pool house, even if because you have the A and E buildings ADA bathrooms, it still also requires a material alteration vote. All right. So that is the ADA bathroom in a nutshell. The issue regarding the roof. So from my understanding, the prior pool house had a roof that covered the whole structure. This new pool house has a roof that also covers the whole structure, except now we have a second floor, which means that there is an area that's open. The architect, and I would defer to the architect here because I'm not an architect. I don't know the complexities regarding the code or any safety issues or protection issues in terms of wind gusts and roofs, so I'm not going to opine on that. But in previous experience, and please speak to your own architect about this, but in previous experience with other communities that have had issues that are similar to this, the recommendation was to have a full roof over the structure. And the reason for that from those architects and those engineers is that there's some protection element here over wind gusts and you know, I'm trying to use their terms and I'm coming up at a loss, but there's some protection that could occur from the wind gusts having a full roof rather than having half a roof or only part of the building that's covered by a roof on a certain elevation. So that is the issue regarding the roof. In terms of the railing, again, there was a question regarding railings and why we would need railings over the second story. If you're going to have a second story and you're going to have that open space because the full roof covers the second story, I think that it is probably required by code to have that railing. And I don't think that your architect would have recommended or even placed that railing in the renderings if it was not required. And I'm pretty darn sure that there is a minimum height for that railing. I don't know if you can make it a little bit higher. That's something, again, that you would need to speak with your architect about or your engineer about. But I would say that, you know, in terms of railings, if you're going to have that second story open space, you would need that railing, because I think it's probably required by code, although I would request that you all, confirm that with your architect. Regarding the second story open space. So if the full roof covers the second story, there's going to be an open space that's going to be created. And I know people, some people that have sent me emails are questioning what that space is going to be used for. The assumption is that it's going to be filled all the time, full of folks that are socializing. So now the view is obstructed from some units because now there's going to be people in that area all the time. I'm not so quick to make that assumption. It is a second story open space that may be used. It's a common element of the association. And it may be used pursuant to the rules and regulations of the association. And so I think the association as a whole and the board from time to time is going to be able to prescribe what area or what the use is for that area. So I'm not so quick to assume that it's going to be only used for socializing. And so, you know, it's not a good use of the space. There were some questions from owners regarding their right to a view. And I know I've discussed this previously at a previous town hall. In the state of Florida, there is no automatic right to a view. The right to a view is rooted in contract. And whether or not a person is guaranteed a view is rooted in paper, in contract. And so the contract that the association has with its owners is its declaration of condominium, as it may be amended from time to time. And currently your association does not have a right to a view. And I will say most places do not have a right to a view. I think in the last 12 years of practice, I've only seen one association that protects the right to a view. And so, although I understand that some views may change, there is no inherent right to a view. And while I know that some folks have opinions regarding this matter, I don't think that any dispute or any challenge regarding the right to a view would prevail because of the lack of language in the declaration of condominium. And then finally, there's some questions regarding the reconstruction provision in the declaration of condominium. There is a reconstruction provision in the declaration of condominium. It essentially requires reconstruction to be substantially in accordance to the plans and specifications for original buildings, or in the alternative, new plans and specifications after board approval, as well as approval of 75% of all owners. Not 75% of those voting, not provided that there's 131. It's now 75% of all owners. I'm going to tell you that this provision is not going to supersede changes in the building code. It's not going to supersede changes in the ordinances or your regulations. And so it's going to effectively function the same as what is proposed today. You got to put back what was there previously, accounting for new regulations, current regulations, current ordinances, and current laws. And so we're essentially back to the default, which is not the option, which is the two-story pool house with the amenities that are there. This argument, there is an argument that not only would material alterations be subject to, there is an argument here that not only would this two-story pool house and then changes to it not only be subject to 75% of those voting, provided that at least 131 vote yes. But if we're going to push for changes, we would conceivably be subject to the reconstruction provision that also requires approval of 75% of the entire membership, which is a much higher threshold than your material alteration threshold. And so while it is there, it is it's usually seen as reconstruction in terms of whether or not we want to terminate the condominium or whether or not we want to make any substantial changes. And so I wanted to account for that. I wanted to make sure that I address that although I know that we're working with the material alteration threshold instead. So that really is my summary. And those are the open things that I wanted to talk about based on the emails that I received. Harlan, I know you and I talked about this. If there are any particular questions to clarify, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kyla, for addressing those somewhat in a generic way, because some of the questions that were presented, even though I forward every single one of them to you, there was some repetition in those questions. So you put them together in a package so that it'll be a little easier for everyone to understand. But as you have offered, I'm going to step out of the way and let owners ask you questions. So.
Kyla, this is Kathleen Nisi. Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going about some of these questions that came up. They're all in the same thing. When you said that the board about the empty space and the board can say what it wants later, what if before the vote, the ballot clearly discussed that the additional space would be used for socializing on the second story, as did the voting option 1, which covered it, such that, as Harlan said at the time, owners knew or should have known about this issue? And what if the images that were provided clearly show both a 1- and 2-story structure with a roof, and the 2-story pool house structure shows an image of a person within the proposed social area? Owners knew or should have known about this issue. That is what President Harlan told us earlier. And so that was what we voted on. Does that not suggest that the owners were not given accurate information? If what you say is true, that's part of it. And so that the vote should not be valid because of that. That's number one. Number two, with regard to other issues you have brought up on that, you talk about the hold on, I put stars on some of these. You talk about the roof, but if we don't have anything and never had anything that said you need a whole full roof, and if owners were concerned about cost and you could put the bathrooms up there without forwarding it, wouldn't that make that a practical solution, that you can have the roof end for the first floor everywhere else? So not only would it improve the views, it would improve the cost for the owners. So that's another thing. And I don't want to go on. There are others there I would talk about, but those to me are pretty important, especially that Harlan in fact made that argument to me, that the fact that it was in the ballot. It discussed that space was for socializing. So that's what owners knew or should have known. And the thing that it showed persons walking around up there and socializing. It was both in the ballot, as I said, and in the voting option. So now you want to pretend it wasn't there? That's number one. The only other question I didn't ask you, does that mean if they had left it open and then as soon as the building was built, said, okay, we're going to make this a social area, they could sneak it in without a material alteration vote?
Okay,
Those
so
are my questions. Thank you. I'm sorry if I did too many at once, honey. Sorry about that.
well, that's all right. I'm writing it down because I want to make sure to address it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to take on the socializing issue first, and whether or not the vote is invalidated based on the fact that the word socializing was in the proxy question or the ballot question. I don't think that
it's just the word socializing. No, I'm sorry. I'm being a lawyer with you now, honey.
Huh?
It's that's what the space was for. That it was a social, it's a direct quote, additional space for socializing on the second floor. So it wasn't just the use of the word socializing. It was put in the context of that's what the space was for. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I don't think that invalidates the vote. It is a common element of the association, a common area of the association. So while that ballot question or proxy question or whatever it is, propose that area to be socializing for people, I think that under the rules and regulations of the association, so your declaration allows for the board to adopt certain rules and regulations for the association. And so the board could adopt the use or allow for use that's other than what is proposed. So I don't think that invalidates the vote.
But
and I
you
don't
call
think
it
that
a common area. It was not a common area. They are now creating it. And there are rules in our documents about creating new common areas. And those haven't been fulfilled either. And if it is possible to do that second floor without the new common area, how can you rely on that? Because we never voted to increase the new common area, to increase the common area.
Okay, so, I'm gonna take on the socializing issue then. I will take on the common area and the whole roof, because the fact that if the roof is extended, then that means there is that area. So let me get through the socializing one, and then I will talk about the roof.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I don't think that the fact that there are, renderings that show people walking on it, basically makes that space a socializing space. I think that area is a common element, a common area. Well, to be particular, you're a condominium, so it's a common element, that is subject to rules and regulations of the association. So that means that the board can adopt rules and regulations regarding that space. So I don't think your vote is going to be invalidated based on a vote or a ballot question or a proxy question that says that that space is going to be used for socializing. And then the second part regarding the whole roof. You mentioned something about cost and the fact that it's going to cost less for less roof space. I'm not really sure. Again, I don't know what the costs are. And I don't know how the fact that a roof that is going to cover a whole building versus a roof that's going to cover less than once, or of only a first story and then a second story. I don't know the cost correlation there and the differences, but that doesn't really make a difference in terms of material alteration. So I'm not taking cost into account, although I know practically we should take cost into account. But legally, in this discussion, I'm not taking cost into account because that is not really looked on as taken into account in this discussion regarding material alteration. It's whether or not you're going to have a roof that covers the whole building versus a roof that only covers the first floor and then the second floor as it relates to only whatever components have to be on the second floor. Okay. Again, when I talked about it earlier, I said I would need you all to defer to your architect on this situation, because I cannot provide an opinion regarding whether or not it's safer to have a roof that covers a whole roof that covers a whole structure versus a roof that covers one story and then another roof that covers the second story. That's not a legal opinion. But in similar situations where I have been involved in these types of discussions, I have had architects and engineers provide those opinions that, in their opinion, for protection regarding wind, it is actually more protected to have those. Now, again, I cannot make that opinion because I am not an architect or an engineer, but I've been in similar situations where that has occurred. And so in that instance, regarding the extension of the roof, that's all I can say about that situation. In relation to the creation of new common areas, I know that we are kind of being very specific regarding that new socializing space or open space as a creation of new common areas, or I'm sorry, common elements. That's not the way that the Florida statutes and the condominium law in general looks at it. You're not buying a new piece of property and making it a common element or making it association property. The land on which the pool house is going to sit is a common element of the association. And so it will not be considered a new common element to have that second floor open space.
Thank you, Kyla. Let's let another owner, Beth Naylor is also an attorney and submitted a question for you. She's raised her hand. Beth, would you go ahead, please?
Sure. Thanks, Harlan. Kyla, thanks for your time. I have two questions. One is the language that you cited on reconstruction after a casualty in our current documents. Can you just let me know which bylaw amendment that is in? Because certainly the older ones don't have that requirement that you mentioned with regard to 75% of all owners. And then,
Yes, it is in the amended and restated declaration that was adopted in 1992.
92.
And yes, 1992, and it I believe it's section 11.6.
Thank you. And then my second question is, obviously, the way I look at this, and I understand the multiple layers of regulations and law changes and governing documents and state law and all of that. But essentially what we're dealing with is two different types of material alterations here. And my question is, why wasn't the vote asking the ownership to approve the 2-story with bathrooms such that the default would have been the 1-story without bathrooms? And there it seems to me that somehow amenities were, or bathrooms were, preferred over the appearance of the building. And again, looking at the definition of material alterations, certainly you have use, function, but appearance is a big part of that. And so it just seems to me that that the vote could have been easily either way with very different results. And I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I don't think that it's just the appearance. I don't think that it's simply the appearance of either it's a 1-story or a 2-story. It's because we have to look at the totality of the situation. We have to look at the whole thing, and not only in regards to what it looks like on the outside, but the components that were provided on the inside. And I appreciate the question regarding why that was the default, was the 2-story pool house. And I think the short answer, and actually I don't have a long answer. I think I've talked about the circumstances of why we got here, but I think it's because we looked at the totality of the situation. It's not only the 1-story and the fact that it's only 1-story, but can we provide the bathrooms? And can we provide, electric? Can we provide the other components that are in there? Because in similar arbitration cases, and of course, there's nothing that's generally on point that that is specific to what's happening at the BBC. However, it's more, if you look at the arbitration cases regarding material alterations, it's not just one component that you're looking at, it's all components. And I think regardless of, size, there's not necessarily a priority. It's how can we provide all of it back that was there prior to the event that occurred that would have triggered the material alteration.
Yeah, certainly I understand. And of course, we all know arbitration decisions aren't precedential, but they're things that we look at to make a decision. But we are talking about, again, anything that perceptively changes the form, the shape, all of that. And so I guess what I'm asking is, the vote could have been set up to ask for the 2-story building with bathrooms, having the default be the 1-story without bathrooms, but the decision was made to do it in the reverse, correct?
I don't know if you could call the default a 1-story without bathrooms, because then you wouldn't be putting back the components that was there prior to the casualty.
Right, but right now we're putting, our default is something that is a significant material alteration, which is significantly different in form, shape, and appearance than it was. So it's just, both of them are material alterations. That's
Yes,
the problem.
I agree with you. They are both material alterations, but remember, there are exceptions to requirements of a vote for material alterations, which would account for changes in regulation, changes in code. And so if you are looking at the totality of all of the amenities, and I agree with you, 2-story looks very different than the 1-story that you had. I'm not going to argue with that there. However, in determining what the default was, you have to look at the totality, including any exceptions that are provided. And the exceptions are if there are changes in code, there are changes in regulations, no question it's still a material alteration, but the board, or I'm sorry, the association would then not have to vote on those material alterations because we are simply following the law. I think if we were going to go in reverse and we would say, well, the default is a 1-story without bathrooms, I think that's us saying we're agreeing to the material alteration, and the association needs to then agree to go back to what it's supposed to be, which is now, with the changes in code, 2 stories to provide for all of the amenities that was there previous to the hurricane.
Because I do understand that the code provides that if it's 1 story, you can't have the bathroom. So that would be the way you
Right.
apply the code to reversing it. So and not that I want to debate any further. I'm just trying to get clarity on, the way that it was set up, because it just seems to me, and I think a lot of people, as you have probably seen from the
Yeah.
comments and the amount of outcry, that having the default be something that is substantially different, that also qualifies as a material alteration, just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of logical sense. So
Understand.
that's kind of where we are. And in what we do, there's a lot of gray and room for things to be set up differently. So I guess that's probably my comment. I don't know if the board will move forward with doing anything different, but I do think that based on my review of things, that this could have been set up either way. And if we redo it, I would like for that to be considered. And again, thank you for your time.
Well, Beth, not being a lawyer, I'm still a little bit twisted on what all that means. So we'll have to, if we're going to change that whole strategy, we'll have to get some more counsel outside of this short conversation between the two of you. I know, and I'm not negating either what either one of you are saying, but just not real straightforward in my brain anyway. So I know, Nancy Howard, you had a more interesting question. Did you get it answered, do you believe, Nancy? Are you there?
Yes, Harlan, I'm here. I guess my question is just a little different take, and not being an attorney, reading through the same section 11.6, I interpret it to mean that the owners need to approve with 75% the board's decision to do the 2-story bathroom, which did not happen. We didn't have that vote.
So I appreciate that question. The reason why it did not happen is because the 2-story pool house, although different than what it looks like previously, so not in accordance to your original plans and specifications, was mandated by the new by the current codes, by the current regulations and the current ordinances. And so therein lies and I understand it's not going to be in your documents regarding these exceptions. They are never in these documents regarding these exceptions. And so that's why there was no vote, because as discussed, it is the totality of the situation. It's not just the appearance of whether it's a 1-story or a 2-story pool house. It also includes the amenities that was in there. And so that's why there was no vote, because that is the requirement under the law to put back what was there previously.
Brad, you have continued to have some questions about the default. And as a board member, I want to respect that you have a chance to ask those directly. Go ahead, if you're there.
Okay, yeah, I'm here. I have a couple of questions. One about the financial. You said nothing has really changed, but when we made the first vote on where the 2-story and the location, we were under the impression that as a organization, we had extra funds available to pay for, if not most of this, a good portion of it. And nobody's addressed that has substantially changed now, that we're probably looking at an assessment just to continue operations, and that the building of the pool house, that additional cost may have to be assessed. Is that enough reason to have a second vote? And should that have been addressed initially? And then
Financial, oh,
let me,
go ahead.
I'll
Sorry,
ask
sorry,
both
sorry.
questions
Go
and then
ahead. Yep.
I'll ask both questions. And the second one is, in the pool house that we had originally,
Mhm.
there were a men's sauna and a woman's sauna. And those have not appeared in any of the drawings. And I would believe that that's an amenity that should be just like sinks, showers, and the bathrooms, that the saunas should be in there as well.
Okay, so let me address the financial portion first, and then we'll talk about the saunas. Financially, again, the financial portion is different. Now, whether or not that factor is relevant in terms of asking for a revote, I think is determined by the association. It's not a legal issue, again, because financially, the finances to fund a project is different from whether or not something is or isn't a material alteration. So that, I think, depends on the association. So I'm sorry, Brad, that's a non-answer.
Okay.
But it depends on what you all want to do, because ultimately this is your association. It's whether or not you get the requisite vote that's required under the declaration. And then to your question regarding the saunas, my understanding, and I don't have a lot regarding the saunas. My understanding is there were originally saunas, and then they were allowed to go into disrepair and not maintained over the years. Is that correct?
I believe that was true, that they went
Yeah.
into disrepair, but I don't think that there was ever a material alteration vote. I think it was just that people
Mhm.
didn't maintain it.
Yeah, it was just not
Prior
maintained. It
boards.
was just allowed to kind of go by the wayside.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
deteriorate.
Yes, deteriorate. Yeah, I think it is an amenity of the association that should be put back. Absolutely. And if you don't want to put it back, is it subject to a material alteration vote? Yes, it is. So that it is something to be considered. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Chuck Wells had his hand up. Chuck, are you still there?
I am, Harlan. Thank you for letting me in. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Can you go back and I think we all would have a better understanding now, and thank you for the language around why the two-story solution was the one that was the fallback, was the one that we had to get the amendment on. But can you go back and clarify the language on, we all know a lot more now as an association than we did when we voted on the first pool house, and Brad alluded to some of it, but there's been a lot that has come about in terms of costs and not quite understanding clearly the first go around with what we were looking at doing. Can you go back and clarify what would be required for the association to have another vote, material alteration vote, not only on the pool house and the bathrooms? Can you kind of clarify, if many of us would like to see another vote, what would be required?
The board can call for a revote. And so you would speak to your board members regarding calling for a revote. Now, admittedly, your material alteration threshold is high. It's not an easy get. It's 75% of the members of the members that are present and voting at a meeting, provided that you receive, or the association receive, 131 yes votes. So at a minimum, there has to be 131 yes votes. Or if there are more, or if there are more than 131, it has to be at least 75% of those voting have to say yes. And so if the association wants to do a revote, and I can't put my head around, I don't remember the results of the previous vote, but I think there was a difference or a need for maybe 10 or 12 votes. And so if there is a revote that's proposed by the membership or proposed by the board, then you would need to at least get those, assuming that or assuming that nobody changes their minds also, from the folks that said no to the previous material, or yes to the previous material alteration, and now are going back to the no for the two-story pool house.
Okay, so there's nothing legally that would prevent the board from putting this out again, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Kyla, I've been asked and have had significant amount of pressure from owners to press for a change in the bylaws. In other words, they want us to vote for ask the owners to change our bylaws to make it easier in general to pass a material alteration vote. And I happen to agree with that. In fact, we proposed that before, and it was turned down. Although at that time, the threshold was 51%. And probably that was too low, and that may be one of the reasons it was turned down. Here's my real question. From your perspective, what's the appropriate timing for a vote to change the bylaws? Is it now, while we're in the midst of this, or is it after we've resolved this issue?
Good question. From my perspective, I think you have this, and this is my opinion, and as Beth said in her correspondence, you know, different attorneys have different opinions. But from my perspective, it is, at this point, you're in the situation where you are. And so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do a material or a change to the material alteration vote now. If you do that, it will require a membership vote. It will require a mailing to your membership or email, depending on who has approved e-notice. It will require the vote. I don't remember what the approval threshold is right now regarding amending that provision. But it could conceivably take a few months, which would delay a lot of the of what's going on already regarding your reconstruction. And it also might have some financial ramifications based on how much money you've already invested in current plans and changes to those plans. So I don't know if I would recommend that you do it right now.
The threshold is 75% of all owners to change our bylaws, different than a material alteration vote. I also have had significant amount of pushback from people, some of it polite and in a friendly manner, and others not so polite. And here's how it centers around. How could you possibly allow this to happen when 72% of the owners want it one way? That is a one-story, and only 28%, or whatever the exact number is, want it the other way. How could you possibly allow that to happen as a president or as the board? Can you comment on that, please?
I can certainly comment on that. You know, your board members are owners just like everybody else. And they have their own personal opinions, but when they put on their board member hat, they are required to act as a fiduciary to all of the members. They have a fiduciary duty to all of the members to enforce the governing documents and to also abide by them. And so there is a material alteration threshold in your governing documents. And if there is no material alteration approval, then I would posit a question for you, Harlan, the other way. How could you, if the board allowed for this to happen, and I know I'm not an owner and I don't have a vote, but if I would take a different spin on this, I would say, how can you as board members not abide by your governing documents? And I think you have folks with different opinions through your community. And I think that you're going to get, if the board does not follow its governing documents, I think you're going to get that question. Plus, there might be some liability because certainly all of our board members by this point and most of our owners are very aware of what these documents say. And if we just turn around and we say, well, I know at least the majority or even 72%, but not the material alteration threshold has approved it, and we're going to do what we're told to do by not the requisite, the requisite approval threshold, I think that there's going to be a claim that you guys are not following your fiduciary duty to all the members by abiding by these documents.
I've also had significant pressure to slow down the process. To say, well, just drag your feet, don't get it done. Then we'll have time to think about it later, or maybe kick the can down the road. To
Right.
me, that doesn't seem appropriate either, but I'd like to have your opinion publicly.
I'm not a particular fan of kicking the can down the road. I guess the question is how long? How long are we going to kick that can down the road? Are we going to kick it down the road a month, a few days, a year? Hurricane Ian it's 2024. It was more than a year ago at this point. Today is 2024, but it was more than a year ago at this point. And most of the associations are slowly getting back up and running and reconstructing. And I would encourage you all not to delay. I mean, if you want to delay a little bit, I'm fine with that, I guess. But we've had issues regarding vendors, we've had issues regarding supplies. And so if you've got vendors that are ready to work with supplies that are available, and you've got professionals like your engineers and your architects that are available, I don't see the point of delaying.
Kyla, you've been awesome today. I think we've given the ownership an opportunity to ask questions. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any raised hands.
Harlan,
Well, this is Pam
Harlan,
Young.
I'm in a car. I can't speak.
Okay.
Hello.
We got two people. It sounds like Brad, go ahead.
Well, I have a question regarding our ability to pass these bylaws changes. And it seems to me that our declarations were old and archaic, and regardless of what's going on, certainly in this case, to not represent the majority of the owners, we should take a good hard look at it. And in your experience, it's surprising to me that you're not coming forth with that a majority of these associations are making the changes to their bylaws because they can't get the votes and they can't do what represents the majority of the people. And in fact, I'm a owner in Pelican Bay, and last year we just went through that change because of that. You can't get enough people to vote. It's hard to, and you want to represent the majority. You don't want to rely on defaults. So I'm kind of surprised on that. And the second thing is, I'm surprised that you would mention how much money we have invested in this, because that really has no concern with the legal. And it seems to me that you're pushing forward to go with the 2-story. Thanks.
So in terms of your material alteration vote, I know that this issue has been talked about time and time again in the association. And while I have some associations that have a majority of those voting to materially alter, and I have some associations that require a majority of everyone, I also have associations that have not one provided 131, but it's different and specific to the association. So I have many associations with many varying material alteration thresholds. I have some associations that have a dollar component before a material alteration vote is triggered, or a percentage of the budget component. It is very different for every association. And so what you have now is what you have. And I know that has been a discussion in the association for a few years. And it's a question of whether or not you can get your association members to agree on an amendment to that provision. So that's number one. And Brad, maybe on your second point, I misunderstood, but I think you said that I didn't mention the investment, or I did mention the investment into this whole thing.
Right. That's correct.
That I did or didn't?
No, that you said that, we've already invested $140,000 in moving forward with this project. And I don't care what we invest. I want to make the right decision that represents the majority of the people. So,
right.
Yeah, that might be money not very well spent, but that doesn't matter to me, because 30 years from now, they're not going to look back and say, oh, you guys did this wrong. because you didn't spend $140,000, or what portion of that $140,000 was actually to the two-story versus what that could be, that 140,000 could have been used on the one-story as well. So there, we spent money, but some of it might be tied to a one-story as well. So that's where I'm at on it, Kyle. And I hate to be argumentative, but obviously we're on different sides.
No, I understand. And that's why we're having this forum, to have this conversation. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I have a hard stop at 3:30. I had a call that was scheduled previously, but Brad, I want to address what you said regarding the investment. Again, I said the money is not related. The money that you've spent is not related to regarding this material alteration. I do want to recognize the funds that you've already expended towards this. However, if there is, if the association wants to look at other options, the association can. It's just a question of whether or not you can get the vote that is needed. And I know, Brad, you mentioned what a majority of everybody wants. Well, that's simply not the case based on your governing documents. It's not just a majority. And that was done on purpose by your membership many years ago to say, it's not just the majority that carries, it's got to be more than a majority. It's got to be 75% of those voting, assuming we have 131 yes votes. So it's a question of whether or not you can get those votes at this point.
Kyla, thank you so very, very much. I know you had a hard stop at 3:30, and I think you've answered every question that was submitted, and you were kind enough to answer those that were spontaneous without prep time. And I didn't prep her, by the way, on my question. She didn't even know they were coming. So thank you.
Thanks, Harlan.
We wish you well. Thank you for your time and attention and all your prep time and so on. And take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Owners, we did offer that we could extend this. I'm not sure what more the board is going to be able to offer to the conversation at the moment. You heard the legal piece of it, and I guess we can open it up for questions, but I'm not sure what else we can answer at this moment.
President Steuben, this is Pam Young.
Yes.
And I wanted to say this or ask this to her, but I understand that she was in a hurry. To me, my personal opinion is that if we can provide all of those amenities in close proximity to a one-story pool house, why not? We can have bathrooms that are close enough that can be ADA. If we wanted to add a shower, my understanding is that we could have showers in the corridor bathrooms. We have the social room that is very close. We can have an ice maker in there. We have a sink. We have even more amenities. We have a refrigerator. We have a stove. There certainly it's a covered space for people to get out of the sun and to eat lunch, socialize, or whatever. There's electricity there. All of these areas where these amenities, where we could fulfill or have these needed amenities, are close by, and we can have a one-story. Is that possible? My question to the lawyer would this be okay?
Well,
and
I can't fully answer for her, but from my understanding of listening to her talk several times and having her reading what her opinions have been, no, I don't think it would be okay from a legal perspective that we would have had to vote as an association. No, from a particular.
I know it would need a vote.
From a community.
I mean,
from a community.
I'm saying it would. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Hello.
From a community's perspective, I'm sure that we could argue and debate and maybe that's where we need to go next. I don't know, but thanks for your opinion. Let's see if there are any other opinions. I've got it.
Well, and to finalize, Harlan, I just take a second of your time. I wasn't arguing and I wasn't debating. I was just offering that up as a reasonable alternative, a reasonable solution that maybe owners would say, hey, okay, we have a social room that's never used, very rarely used. We would get more out of the social room. It would be an investment that would be used. So I wasn't arguing or debating. It was just a suggestion from a peon owner. Thank you.
I wasn't implying that you were arguing. Perhaps it was the wrong choice of words. I'm sorry. And I appreciate your opinion. Anybody else with opinions that you want to share at this?
Harlan, this is Cheryl Newell. I just have two. One is what I heard from Kyla is that the board can call for a revote on the pool house. That's not an issue. And two, if we don't want to put the saunas back into the pool house, that's a material alteration that requires an owner vote. Did I hear both of those correctly?
That's what I heard as well. Yes.
Okay. It seems that since such a large majority of people prefer a one story, that a revote would certainly be in order. As several people have said, a lot of things have changed, including the cost over the past 9 months that this has been under consideration, and a revote could be in order. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know that cost has changed. We don't have any other bids on the cost. To be able to get an accurate cost, we've been advised that we need to spend more money for it's called a MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contracting work, so that we have a better building. So we have to invest more money in that in order to get a more accurate cost. We had only 2 companies that were willing to bid on it initially. And we gave you the average between the 2, which is the best that we could do at the time. I've invited board members and owners to find somebody else who'll come in and vote, bid on it. And we've been unable to get that. So I don't know if there's anything new on the cost. I suspect personally that the cost will be probably higher than what we projected, but that was only a projection based on those 2 estimates. And there are really no other, as have been pointed out, there are no other changes here that have been made. We do know that in order to open the pool, we have to have an ADA bathrooms. We could bring in a portable toilet with ADA bathrooms. That would satisfy the requirement. I'm not sure we'd all want that because with a lot of wasted money. It's not like we have to have ADA bathrooms in any of the buildings. Let's see if there's anybody else that has a question that hasn't. Yeah.
This is Ginny Mills.
Yes, Ginny.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for doing everything. I know a lot of things seem like they might be just simply fixed if we just do one thing or another, but I don't think we're always seeing everyone's side. For example, I know in A, we have a lot of safety concerns being here so exposed, but also those increases would increase if I had every renter using my bathroom. You know, I know that A and E bathrooms could already be used by the pool people, but when they're the only bathrooms, and then we say, oh, well, let's just do this on A and E and everything, we'll put an ice machine in A and we'll put a, whatever in E because they'll all be close by. It doesn't really consider the safety issues that some of us in A and E are concerned about. So that's my point, that perhaps we think of everyone when we try to quick solve some things.
Thank you, Jenny. Anybody else who hasn't had a chance to speak?
I have a question, Harlan, for everybody. I think Cal's first statement was the code changed. The board didn't change the code change. You gotta follow the code. So if you want to go to one story, you got to make sure it passes code and passes Florida statute for pool before you do anything, and then you go back and vote. So I would look into that as the CAM and say, okay, bam, here's the Florida pool statute we have to use, and then the code we did go to see what they have to say with Bonita Springs and FEMA.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
This is Melvia McCann, and I just want to say that I thought I just recently heard that the building inspector with Bonita said that we're not required at all to have you today. And I'm not opposed to having a couple of them, but if we don't even, I thought that was the reason why we needed a 2-story. So that's all I wanted to say.
I'm sorry,
Thank
there
you.
was some background noise, Melvia. State your first sentence again, or your second sentence again, please.
Sure. I had heard recently that it was asked, a group had asked the city of Bonita Springs building inspector, and that it is not required any ADA bathrooms. It was maybe a choice. They're not required us to have any.
We're not required to
So
have, we're not required to have them in the buildings, independent of the pool. That's correct. However, if the pool,
Go ahead.
if our intention is to use those bathrooms as the bathroom that is required by pool code, then they have to be ADA.
There might be some, maybe I got my information wrong, but we were advised that really it's not required at this time. I think we also looked it up online because we're a residential community. We are not required to have any ADAs. And I think it's a good idea to do that, though. I have nothing wrong. I think people using the pool and the beach. In somebody's home, they do their own renovation.
I've relied on our engineering and architectural experts on that opinion, and it's my understanding, without any question in my mind, that we're required to have ADA bathrooms for the pool. If they're
I can contact the building inspector and get that information for you.
You can ask whoever you want, but I mean, I've talked to our engineering consultant, I've talked to our architectural consultant, and let me just finish my sentence. And that is that we're required to have ADA bathrooms available for the pool in the reconstruction of our second-story pool house. And if we don't have a second-story pool house, we'd be required to have ADA bathrooms within 200 feet. That would mean either A or E. If you have a written guideline that's contrary, I won't, verbal doesn't do us any good, because we've found that particularly people at the city seem to change their mind on verbal. But if you have something written that we can refer to that is a variance, that, I mean, I don't pretend to be expert here.
I'll be glad to look into that because it is the building inspector, and he did talk about permits, and he talked about our requirements. So I will look into it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but I certainly would be hard pressed to believe that to be true. So let's see. Does anybody else have a question or comment they want to make?
We have somebody in the upper left-hand corner, Zoom user, that has their hand up, Harlan.
I'm not seeing it, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Harlan. Lori Sauter. I just, on 462E, I just wanted to comment on what Pam Young and what Brad said. The reason I'm feeling that we should have a revote on the pool house is, as these votes were coming out in the beginning, the location was one, the 2-story was another. Things were coming out in dribs and drabs, and we didn't have all the information when the votes were being taken, which I think was unfortunate from the very beginning, to vote on something that we don't know what it's going to be like, used for, views blocked, etc. I think at this point, I think a lot of people would really want to have a second vote, a revote on, now that we know all the information about having accessibility to the ADA bathrooms in A and E, and to use some of the whatever ice machine and stuff in the social room in A. We paid big money for these rooms that we don't even use that often. I forgot who said that one, if that was Pam or somebody. But there is an awful lot, I think, at stake here, that just views. I think I feel so sorry for so many views that are going to be changed for this. And legally or not legally, is our views are not taken into, they're not cutting sand, whatever, cutting stone. But I just feel that I think there's enough people that feel that we should have another revote now that we have all the information. Since we have now all this information, I think we would have a better, I don't know what the outcome would be, but I think it should be something that should be decided now by membership, that now that we have all the information. Thank you.
Lori, thank you for your comment. I don't think there is any new information. We did everything we could to provide as much information as was available at the time. And there certainly are no new rules or laws or anything that have come to play. So I don't know what would be new. If you go back and look at the original documents, we talked about views, we talked about cost, we talked about a whole bunch of things. I'm not against a revote. In fact, behind the scenes, I've had conversations with some of the board members about that. So I'm not against that. And we'll see how the board wants to play that one out. I think there's some of the comments that you made and others have made would support that. I'm not going to negate that, but I don't think there's much that's new. I'd like to ask if there's anybody else that has any questions, comments.
Harlan, this is Laura English. I have a comment.
Sure, please.
Hi. I kind of disagree about the new information. It's not necessarily new, but it's all presented all together. We have all of the information. When we were first voting, again, like the other folks had said, location versus two-story. I didn't even realize on the first vote that the two-story was the default, to be honest with you. I didn't know that. And when I learned that, I was a little shocked. Again, not happy that we have a default, but that's the law, and that's how it is. People who don't vote or don't care get the default vote. I don't know any other voting system that does that, but that's the law there, and so that's the way it is. But I would definitely love a revote. I think we deserve a revote, and I think that's in the best for everyone. Again, not really new information, but all the information is all presented. We all know every option right now, and that's my thought on that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura. And probably the best way to maybe restate that is not necessarily new information, but maybe it's been discussed and now people have maybe a better understanding of the information. That I would accept to be true, for sure. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Harlan. Can you hear me? This is Joyce Hagan.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I would just add to the chorus after thanking you and everybody on the board for all of their hard work. And I know none of you asked for this to happen, and you're doing the best you can. And I want to be very cooperative. I am one of the people that is going to have a tough time with that second story right in front of my C apartment. And I think originally I would have voted for it to go to the middle if I had known that it was going to be a two-story structure. Because it seems like it kind of punishes everybody equally if it's in the middle, in the back of the pool. So I don't know if that's something that could help with the stipulation for a new vote or not, but just an idea. And thanks again, Harlan.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. That's an interesting dilemma for us, isn't it? Yeah, I wish we had the wisdom of Solomon. Anybody else have any questions?
Maybe we should split it, and maybe we should split it up and just have two pool houses, like Solomon did. Split the baby.
Yeah, there you go. Any other questions or comments? All right. I thank everybody for your time. Hope we hopefully we learned a few or had some clarity on a few things. And now I'm going to ask my board to get together in Powell, although we can't do it all together, can we? So we're on different states and whatever, but we're going to have to decide what we're going to do next with the information that's been provided and the opinions been offered. Petition that was shared with us and the town hall meeting that we've now had. So I appreciate everybody's time today. Please enjoy the rest of your day and evening. I might just have a glass of wine if you don't mind. Anyway, take care, everybody. Bye.